Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our class tonight. Once again, we have Chris DeMeo today. He's going to do a bit of a deeper dive on repairing the gears on a bike, including cable replacement, which is no small feat. So we may actually wind up doing this a second time. This time it's on a bike with a certain kind of handlebars, right? And then in 2 weeks, we may do it with tape replacement. So we'll also have a session on how to replace the tape. Also, next week, Chris is going to do a special session on Ride with GPS. So we've just determined our schedule for the next couple of weeks. I think there are a couple of people who are a little bit late in coming. They signed in after 6:55, so I'm going to have to get the link out to them. I would ask everybody if you could try and register before 6:30 p.m. of the night of. That would be helpful. All right, do you want to hold off a minute, or do you want to get started?
No, I can hold on a second. I got to bring my little picture up. I don't know where it happens here. There we go. All right. Yeah, I couldn't see myself. I was like, whoa, what's happening here? Yeah, I can get started whenever you're ready. We could do that.
All right, hang on, because unfortunately I have a bit of a slow computer here, so now to go and get everyone a copy of this link.
Well, good evening, everybody. Sorry about last night. If everyone was signed up, I got stuck at work. So unfortunately, I was on Long Beach Island. I'm an electrician, so unfortunately, I'm still out on the road. But thanks a lot for coming tonight, and we'll do it a day late, but not a dollar short. All right, so I won't actually get started with the bike yet, but tonight I'll just explain what we're going to do. So tonight we are going to go through how to replace the cables on the drivetrain of the bike side, and then how to make sure everything's adjusted back in the way it's supposed to be to put the new cables in. So it should be pretty good. We did brakes last time. The drivetrain's a little bit, a couple more steps, but it's not any harder. It's just a few more steps to it. So we'll go through it. And if anyone has any questions, I'm sure Alan has the chat box up, so you can just chat them into the chat box, and we'll address them. And we'll try to get everybody covered.
Yep, everybody's in now that have sent me the email.
Ready.
You're good. You're good. You're good to go, Chris. Could you hear me? Yeah.
Right. So here we go. So I can hear you. Yep.
You're all set. You're good to go.
Okay. So the first thing. I'm good. I'm good. We're good. You can hear. Can you hear?
We hear you. I'm going to mute myself in case I'm bringing background.
If everyone can give me a thumbs.
The problem is that you go in and out, Chris. Like right now, we don't hear a word you're saying.
Well,
now we do. Now you sound very good.
Okay, I think there's a delay, Alan. So try not to talk to me because it's just really confusing. So. Okay, so we'll start the class. The first thing we have to do is remove the chain. So the first thing we'll do is go ahead and find where the quick link is. Actually, I take that back. The first thing we're going to do is make sure that we're in the lowest gear on the back. So we want to be in the smallest cog, all the way out, so away from the wheel. It'll make it easier and take some strain off the chain. So then we're going to find the quick link. Let's see where we're at here. Not cooperating, of course. 1 second. All right, we're going to find the quick link, which is all messed up now. Let's see. There it is right there. And we open this up. We went through this in a previous class, but the way that these work is if you push them together, in theory, they'll pop open. Now, a lot of times it takes a little more than just your hands to do it, unfortunately, because the bike's been ridden and the chain's been pulled tight. So I use a pair of pliers. They make a special version if you want, but I just use a pair of needle pliers. So once you get it apart and opened up, it will separate apart. So you can bring it off to the side and it'll open up half, you know, kind of half and half. So I take these off. This is what half, I'm sorry, that's the camera. This is what the half looks like. So this part goes, this little piece right here goes in the chain. And then the other half is just a mirror image of it. And they put together into these little holes that are in there. And
There's
then they lock
a
in.
comment that not every chain has a
They
quick
won't come off
release.
very easy, but that's correct. Some of them you have to punch the pin out with a tool. I'm not going to go over that here because this one does have the quick release, but the YouTube will tell you how to punch that out, or we'll go through it in a later class.
Yeah, people are also saying that
not everyone does. So then we're going to.
Yeah, this is not working the way it has in past weeks. Something is very different this week, just so you hear it. But right now there's a question of whether Kent asked if everyone else's screen is frozen. Everyone is pretty much chiming in that the video is much sketchier today than it has been in the past. Everyone agrees it's hard to see the quick link on the camera. So Ed is actually sharing a picture right now, a link to a picture of it for people who want to see it. Now, I'm not sure what to do about the speed. I'm going to stop talking and let you carry on, and we'll see how it goes for a bit. Maybe stepping back. I don't know.
Yeah, I unfortunately I have very limited places. You know, obviously with quarantine, I can't. There's families all out in the balcony tonight. I can't get out there, so this is kind of where I'm stuck. I apologize. Anyways, yeah. Anyway, train of thought there. Yeah. So we're gonna remove this chain off of the gears here. Get this right out of the way. All right. Now, the reason I remove the chain is when the frequency that I change my cables about every couple of years or so, or not, maybe every year and a half. That's the frequency I'll change my chain, just so I remember kind of when the last time I did it. It's not science. It just happens to work for me. It's a good kind of, if you ride an average amount of miles, that's a pretty decent time to change that. So obviously, if you ride a lot of miles, you want to change your chain sooner than that. But that being said, we will. All right. So we're going to put the new chain on now. So basically, everything happens in reverse. So we'll go ahead and thread on the chain onto the front here. And then from here, we're going to go, each one of these wheels has an open side. You'll see there's one side that's open, there's one side that's closed. So the top one is going to go over the sprocket. Sorry, hang on, let me move the camera. Sorry. Your chain is going to go over your sprocket. And then it's going to go on between the sprocket and this top gear on the derailleur. So in this right here, it's going to go right over the front side of this top gear on the side with the closed part. So it's going to lie right on that front side. Then what you're going to do is you're going to feed it through between the arms. And you're going to go, there's usually a little guard on the back of the arm here. And what you're going to do is you're going to go between that and the chain. So it's going to be on the outside of this sprocket. So the inside of this one closest to the bike, and the outside of this one pointing towards the back of the bike. Then we are going to just get the other end of the chain here. Hang on 1 second. All right, let that sit for a sec. Then we are going to grab our link. A new one will usually come with the chain, or it'll come with a pin to push in to put the chain together. Today we'll go over the quick link. So what I usually do is take one side and put it in from the back. The other side of the chain, we're going to put it in onto the front side, the side facing us. So that way it's on one on either side. So they're going to link together. Then we'll go ahead and just reattach. Reattach that quick link together. What's going to happen is they're slide in. There's a larger side of the slot and a smaller side. You're going to slide it into the larger side of the slot. Let's have to turn my hands around. And what will happen is it will slide itself and kind of lock into that back slot. Now your chain's back together. So there's your new chain ready to go. Now we'll go ahead and do the gears.
So there's a question, Chris. Wow, yeah, this is really different from the prior times. Anyway, how do you buy the right replacement chain for your bike? And somebody wrote about 2 recommended tools: a chain wear tool to determine if your chain is worn, and a quick release pliers, preferably with one. And then someone saying they bought a Park tool for this specifically, and it's made a world of difference in taking it apart. Yeah. And Ed Raven is saying he just bought a
special tool.
Yeah, chain link pliers at Habitat for $15. It makes the process much easier. The less often you clean your chain, the harder it will be to open it. So
that's right.
All right, so there you go. But the question of how do you choose a new chain? Is there like a difference?
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I messed up. But go ahead. I'll answer the question first, and I got to fix this real quick.
Is there a way to?
How do you choose the? So the way you choose the chain is that you have to count how many speeds are on your bike first of all. So if you have a 9-speed bike, you'll go ahead and you'll get a 9-speed chain. There's a little more to it than that. You're going to have to measure the amount of links in the chain and then measure it to the one that you have. So that's a little bit of a different thing. We'll go over that in a later class, but suffice to say, most of the time, if you go into the bike shop and you tell them I have 9 speeds, and that's how many gears are on the back of the wheel here. So you're going to count how many cogs there are. That'll tell me how many speeds you have. It doesn't matter how many are on the front. It's the back that matters for the chain. So with that being said, yeah, but then you'll have to get it because they come in a standard size, but not every bike is a standard size. So what you'll have to do is measure it towards the old chain and count either that or count the links and cut the, break the chain to the proper size. There's a tool for that. It kind of pops a pin out and gets it out of the way. I apologize. Close back on. But that's how you would get the right size chain. Give me a second, I have to fix this real quick. Just talking too much and doing too many things at once. Pardon. One second, sorry about this. I want to make sure we're all set. Okay, back in business. All right, so now back to what we were talking about, and I apologize for that delay. Now we're going to go ahead and remove the old cables from the bike. and we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna start with the back one first, and then we'll do the front. The first thing we have to do is remove the little cable crimp on the back of the cable. This keeps it from getting frayed. So it's usually squished on there, so you can squish it in the opposite direction, or sometimes you can just knock it off with your pliers. That'll allow us to pull the cable through and then remove it. All right, so then after that, we've completed this step. What we're gonna do is make sure we're in the lowest gear here. And by lowest, I mean the smallest cog. It's gonna take a lot of the pressure off the system, and it's gonna take all the tension off the cable so we don't get it snapping out of our hands. Then what we're gonna do is, there's a nut that holds the cable on. Right here, I'll use this hand so I'm not blocking the camera. We're gonna find the Allen wrench that fits that. This is a 5mm. We're gonna go ahead and loosen that. All right. And then the cable, we can take it right out of there. So now the cable's loose, and we can just go ahead and start pulling it back towards the front of the bike. And as we do that, we'll get to these later. We're going to leave them in place for a minute so we remember which one's which. So I'll move this a little further forward, see what's happening. Here's the back cable here. We're going to leave the cable guard in place. And now, when the cables are open like this, sometimes some bikes have the cable guard will stop here, and then there's just bare cable. When that happens, a lot of times there's these little rubber spacers on there. So you can just take those in your hand, that way you don't lose them. Because once they pull through, they'll fall off, and you can just set those aside. Sometimes you can get new ones. I just use the same ones if they're not damaged. So now, our cable is here. Let me slide this bike around so you can see the front side. Okay. There we go. All right, so now, all right, so now we've got the cable to here. So basically the last piece of cable guard until we get to, or housing until we get to the shifter. All right, so well, these are flat bar shifters. Same as if they're on, I know it's a mountain bike, but it doesn't make a difference. The shifters are the same style as if you have a commuter bike or a hybrid bike, anything like that. The shifters are the same. So what we're gonna do on these Shimano shifters, if you see the way the cable comes in, okay. You can see, bear with me here for a second. This is where the cable goes into the shifter right here. Sorry. If you look on the opposite side of the shifter, and I don't know, yeah, right there, you can see that there's a little screw right where my screwdriver's tapping. You're gonna remove that little screw. So now that we know what we're looking at, let's put the camera back down and stop making everyone seasick. So we are going to remove that little screw. And it's just a little plastic screw, so it's not held in very tightly. It's just to keep the dirt and muck out. So once you remove it, you just want to make sure that you don't drop it, because it's like, really. All right, so there it is. It's just a little, it's really hard to see against my black gloves, but it's just a little black plastic screw. It's just to keep the dirt and the water and the muck out of the shifter. So now that we have that off, we can go ahead and we can take our loose cable that we have from the back, and we can push it back up through into the shifter, and with any luck, there it is. Well, all right. So one of two things is going to happen. You're going to remove the housing from the shifter, and in that case, you can just go ahead and push the cable up. The idea is there's a little, since we took that little screw out, that's where the end of the cable comes out. The end with the little mushroom on it. That's what we want to get at. So we can pull this whole piece right out now, all the old cable. right the whole way out of the housing. So now we got our old cable completely out. We can set that aside. We don't need that right now. The next step we're going to do to the other side of the bike here. The next step we'll do is we'll start making some new cable housing pieces. So the way we do that is usually it comes in one big length, like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to open this up. How are you? Sorry. Hang on one second. Sorry, we got a guy who wants to put his bike away. I'm not talking to the crowd. Okay, back to what we were at there. I apologize. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove that first cable housing. We're going to take it off of both sides. It just slides right out of the holders that are on the bike. You'll see it's a certain length, and it has a little end cap on either side. Little plastic end cap. All right, so what we want to do is we want to remove those end caps. All right, so now we just have the cable. We take our long piece of cable that we got, the new one, the new cable housing. Sorry, I keep going. The new cable housing. We're going to take our old piece and we're going to line it up. Measure it. So that way we can cut it at the right spot. We're going to cut it and make these the same size so that when we replace them, they fit exactly the way they should fit. All right, so then they do make a special tool to cut the cable. I don't have that tool. I loaned it to a friend and I haven't gotten it back yet. I think we talked about this last week. I'm using a pair of regular wire cutters. The only thing we have to think about when we use the regular cutters, again, like last week, is if you can look, and I hope you can see it, that's not perfectly round anymore. It's kind of oval now. So what we want to do, I use this little pick tool that I got at the hardware store. It's round. I stick it in the back of the hole here, and then you got to look inside. There's a plastic insert in there, like a Teflon insert. You want to make sure you get that inside that. And I just go around a little bit. And what it does is it gets it nice and round again. So that's good. And this other side, I don't know who cut this last, so I'm going to do the same thing. Could have been me, could have been the factory, but we'll do the same thing just to start off fresh. Then we're going to grab two of these end caps, the little plastic end caps. They come with the cable kit. And then you're going to throw one on either end, right over the cable. So you can put those on there. Then we're going to put this piece back on the bike just to keep it in place so we know which. This bike has multiple pieces of cable housing. So I like to keep them on the bike right away so I don't mess them up and get them in the wrong order and then I have to unthread the bike and do it all over again. So I just use them to keep them in place. We're going to remove it when we put the cable back on, but for now we'll do that. We're going to do the same thing with the two on the back of the bike. So we swing this back around. And let's see if I can get a better angle here. Okay. So this guy here is that's our piece for the back of the bike. It's our second piece of cable housing. So again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to remove it. We're going to remove the two end caps. And we're going to measure ourselves a new piece. End to end. And then we'll go right to the other side. And once we get it right, grab the pliers.
There's a discussion here about the difference between the cable housings for brake and shifter, that they are different. They look very similar, but there's a comment here that they are different. Are the cables physically different and the housings physically different?
Yes, yes, they are. The cable housings are much, and cables are much bigger diameter. So obviously they have to be a lot stronger because you're putting a lot more force on them when you hit the brakes than you do when you shift. So they are almost always, pardon me, bigger diameter, and then therefore the cable housings are a bigger diameter as well. They're also wrapped differently. They're, I believe they're like a spiral wrap on the brakes, so they don't compress when you, I'm sorry, so they, these are linear. So the shifting cables have pieces of metal in them, strands that go longwise along the cable. And what that does is it stops them from compressing, so it makes your shifts tighter. And then the brake cable is a spiral around, and I guess it's stronger, I'm guessing. It probably resists the pulling strength better. Don't quote me on that. That's just a guess, but I know they are different, and that's the way that they are different. Also, they're different sizes. So if you're going to replace your cables, you need to make sure you get shifter cables or brake cables. They'll be different. All right. I have a couple zip ties holding the cable in place, so I just cut those off. The camera so we can see what we're doing. So now we're going to do the same thing with our third piece here. This bike, like I said, happens to be separated out. Now you'll notice where the cable goes into the derailleur, there's no end cap. That's just the end of the cable. So this you'll be able to tell because you won't be able to fit it in there. It's the diameter of the entry hole is not big enough. So there's only one side that has the plastic end cap on it. All right, remove that. Same thing again. Just measure. And cut. And then we'll go ahead and make our whole circle again, just like we did for the other ones. Okay. Put our end cap back on. Okay. And then we get rid of those. All right. So now that we have everything in place, and it's all fitting right. The other reason I do this is I kind of dry fit it first, because once you put the cable in here, you can't change the sides of the housing. So I like to make my pieces first and dry fit them, make sure everything looks like it did before, make sure I got the right length and nothing's too tight. So the derailleur, when it moves, is going to move this way. And so I'm only going to get slack. I'm at the part where the derailleur is the tightest. So I know I'm good. I got enough slack in that cable. Nothing's too tight. The idea with these cable housings, when I talk about enough slack, and I realize probably not everyone knows what I mean, you want your cable to move as smoothly as possible. So I'm going to use the old one for this. This is the old cable housing. If I had a bend like this in the bike, a real tight bend, that's not happy. That cable is not happy in there. It's a lot of friction. The cable likes it when the bends are as small, as shallow diameter as possible, as large diameter as possible, sorry. So the idea when we make these cables is we don't want a tight bend anywhere, or anyone want too much, too tight, because that just makes friction in there that we don't need. So we always like to make everything kind of really relaxed, nice round bends. Not big enough to get caught on something, would be dangerous, but enough that you have a nice radius so that cable is moving smoothly in there and it's nice and happy. All right. And again, on the front of the bike, the most important thing is, if you didn't have another cable to measure against and you were doing your own, make sure you can turn your handlebars all the way around side to side until they stop, because you don't want your cable to be the item that stops that. Because what will happen is you'll put a lot of stress on there and you can break stuff and it's no good. You don't. You want to have enough slack in the front end that you'll be able to get your wheel all the way around. All right. So now that we got our cable guard, the cable housing made, now we're going to take the new shifter cable, which is right here. We're going to take the new shifter cable that we get in the pack, and we're going to unravel it, make it one big piece here, and then we're going to go ahead and I'll show you how we're going to start feeding it back through. All right, let's move the bike back around to the front. All right, so what we always want to check for is that we're in the lowest gear. So we want to be in the lowest gear, meaning we want our cog to be on the smallest one possible. So downshift all the way till it's the hardest to pedal, all the way to your highest gear in the back. Okay. Then with that hole that we opened from that little screw that was in there, where we removed the cable from originally, we're going to start there. Now I find it easier to remove the cable housing and just let it sit for a second. You take the end of the cable without the stopper on it, and you go ahead and you just thread it right into that hole, and it should only go one place. It should be pretty smooth in there. Yep, and you'll see what'll happen is it will come right out the other side where the cable's supposed to be. Everyone can see that there's the end of the cable. So now that we can take our cable housing and we can feed it right into there. Put it back in. Now, we just push our cable in until we get to the end of the first piece of housing. Now, a lot of times, it's not going to be happy to go through that little plastic cap. There's only a little tiny hole in there. So what you can do is you can remove the plastic cap. We just put it on to size it to make sure everything fit properly. Remove that plastic cap and you'll see the cable come right out. There's the cable in there. Now, it's going to be much easier to find that little tiny hole in the end of the plastic cap. And the reason it's so small is it keeps you from getting dirt and water and stuff inside the cable housing. Keeps everything fresh for a little longer. So we go ahead and put the end cap back on. Let's give you some contrast there. You can see it's there. The cable is out the end of it. Then we're going to route it back around, set it back inside the bike, the holder that's built on the bike, and you'll see there's a little slot in the top of the holder. You can use that to put the cable through. Then, let me turn this around again to the side so you can see this part. Okay. Now, we've got our cable here. We're going to just pull it all the way through until we get to the stopper. It's all the way inside the shifter here. So, here's our shifter. Sorry. Here's our cable. We're going to go ahead all the way until we get that cable all the way inside the shifter and pull it tight. Make sure it's seated all the way. Then you can try shifting. Try shifting up with it. And you'll feel it pull on the cable. And then shift all the way back down. And it should let back out. That lets you know everything's working inside the shifter. So you're good there. Now, we're in the part in the middle of the bike where there's no cable housing. It's just the bare cable. We took 3 little things off there before. We got to remember to put them back on, because this is the part you remember after everything's together and they never make it back. So if you remember, put your 3 little rubber washers on there that keep it from bouncing against the frame, and you'll be good to go. Or be like most of us and just forget to put them on and don't want to do this all over again. So those are in place now. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go through our second piece of cable housing here that we made earlier. So we can remove that from the frame, and we can insert the cable into the little hole in the plastic end cap. And again, unless, we got really lucky, this one came out on its own, but a lot of times it won't. You can feel free to remove that other end cap and get the cable through. We'll put this piece back into the bicycle because there's a slot on the top, so we can throw the cable through the slot. And let's move the camera over to the back now. Now we have our cable at the back. We're through this second piece of housing. So we're going to pull all the slack to here. Now we have a bunch of extra cable now. We have 1 piece of housing left here. Same thing. Let's remove that from the frame. And we're going to insert that into that piece of housing. Now, there is no piece of housing on the back. That is just, let's put this up a little bit. That's just your derailleur. So remember, it doesn't take a piece of it doesn't take the plastic cap, so we don't have to worry about getting through there. There's our cable coming through, and we are inside this little ring on the derailleur. It's going to be in a slightly different place on every derailleur. There'll be a place where the cable goes. So we're in there now. So now we can take all the slack to there, and we'll reinsert this into our frame here, into the holder. There we go. So we got the cable all the way to the back. Now, what we do is we make sure we go ahead and look all the way from the front to the back of the bike. And we make sure that the cable is sitting in exactly where it's supposed to be, because sometimes these cable housings will slip out. And what will happen is you'll tighten the whole system up. And that one piece will slip into place, and all of a sudden everything will be off because you'll have this 1/4 inch of slack in there. So just go back up and make sure everything, all the cable is seated right into the frame where it's supposed to be. So let's take a little bit of time and do that. Okay, good. Everything is seated properly. The other thing we want to do is we want to take our cable adjustment that's on the front shifter, that little turn thing that you do that you turn on the front that adjusts the amount that the gears are moving. We want to make sure that that's a good amount out. We want to make it about the middle. So that way we have enough, we have about an equal amount of adjustment in and out, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so bear with me because I'm new at this camera gig here. This piece right here, you can see that if we turn this in, just bear with me for a second, I can't hold both things at once. If we tighten it into the frame, you'll see that this little metal piece on the outside that was big before has disappeared. That's moving in and out, so that's what gives us our cable adjustment. So what we want to do is we want to get to about halfway on that. So we have about half of the in adjustment and half out. So that when we do the cable in the back, that's how we get our adjustment for our fine tuning for our gears. So we don't have to be perfect right now. We have some adjustment later. So now what we are going to do is we're going to take our cable, we're through the derailleur. Here's the nut that holds the cable that we took it off before. We're going to slide it in the little slot that it goes to. We're going to pull it tight with our hand, pull all the slack out of the cable, and we're going to tighten this Allen nut again, and we're going to make that cable tight in there. All right, so just tighten that enough that it holds. And we're going to be adjusting that probably a few times again. So let's not going to cut this yet. We're going to leave it long until we're done. All right, we're going to make sure it doesn't hit anything. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to try to shift. This is a mountain bike. The wheels catch everything. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to wrap this around on the inside so it doesn't hit anything. All right, so now, or we'll just cut it down the sides. This bike's not cooperating. All right. We're going to leave 2 finger lengths past the derailleur. And we're going to go ahead and trim that. All right. We'll put an end cap on the end here at the end. So now what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to see how good our bike is shifting. Not terrible. I can hear it. It's not exactly where it should be. So that's okay. We're pretty close. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take that thumb screw in the front, the same one we had here. This guy right here on the front where the cable goes in. And we're going to use this to fine tune our gears until they shift like we want them to shift. If it's shifting too far to one direction, you turn that screw in and it'll move the chain. The tighter you make the front end, in other words, the more metal you see, the more of that inner sleeve that you see coming out, the tighter this cable is going to be, and the higher up the derailleur is going to be, so the closer towards the next gear up it's going to be. The opposite direction, it'll be closer towards the next gear down. So you can kind of see which way makes it better, which way makes it worse. So let's see where we're at here. All right, oops, sorry. So, okay, so I turned it out. I gave it a little bit more tension because I was having trouble shifting towards a bigger gear. So I made this cable a little tighter. All right, so now we can see it's shifting pretty well. And when I go back down, it's shifting pretty well as well. So we didn't get it. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for right now. Because we're going to let this set for a couple minutes. And what happens is, people say when you put new cables on, the cables stretch. They don't stretch. What happens is these housings, everything kind of seats really into its perfect final position. So you want to give it a chance to do that, and if you want, you can kind of pull on the cables a little bit, give them a little bit of tension, kind of get everything in place. I like to let it sit while I'm doing the front side, because what's the difference? I'm doing the other one anyways. Then I'll come back and I'll do a fine, you know, perfect tune to everything. All right, so now we get the back all done. Now we're going to move to the front side, the front derailleur. This is some ways a lot easier, some ways a little different. So what we're going to do is, for this guy here, the lowest gear is the least tension. So we're going to take our chain on the front chain ring. Hold on, let me bring the spike up a little bit so we can see better. That's better. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our chain and we're going to put it on the smallest chain ring in the front. That'll eliminate a lot of the tension in the cable. You can see the cable's much looser now. So that's nice, because that gives us a little, we don't have to worry about fighting against any tension when we're taking everything apart. Okay, so now that this is our shifter cable for the front side, comes right down to the derailleur. On some bikes, it goes down the frame and it comes up to the derailleur. Same thing, it's the same idea. It's just it pulls one direction or the other. But it's the same way. You just have to pay attention to look and see how the cable went through the bicycle. So watch very carefully when you pull the old one out, because the new one's going to go exactly the same way. If it goes underneath the frame and pulls up, there's most likely a little piece underneath the frame, a little plastic piece that has a little saddle in it. And your cable is going to go underneath that saddle, between the saddle and the frame. So you want to make sure that you check that, because if you don't, then you have to reroute the whole thing, because the cable won't be sitting in the right spot. So you pay attention to that. And then also just look at the way it goes from the cable guide and which side it hits. Take a look at everything. Take a picture of it with your phone if you want before you start, if you're concerned about it. It's not hard to do. You just kind of want to make sure you got everything in the right spot. So now, with that being said, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead, the same with the back. There's a little nut that holds the cable together onto the derailleur. We're going to go ahead and we're going to loosen that nut up. Okay, might be a little bit tight. It's been on there a while. Now, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take that cable out. Oh, I forgot to take our end cap off. Go ahead and we'll do that. Take the end cap off just like on the front. Now we can slide our cable right out of the derailleur. So there's our empty cable. This piece has only 2 pieces of cable housing. So what we're going to do, the first piece is, first piece is here. So this is our first piece of cable housing for our front derailleur. This bike happens to be on the top too. On the bottom side, there won't be a piece of cable housing. It'll just go against a little piece of plastic on the frame, most likely. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and remove our cable out of this guy. And the same thing, just make sure you get those little rubber spacers off of the cable, or else they'll bounce around everywhere and you never find anything. All right, so now we'll move to the front side of the bike here. Now we have our cable off. We're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to just make sure we keep that cable housing right where it was so we can get the sizes right. Now, same thing. We're going to take our little Phillips head screwdriver and we're going to remove that plastic end cap just like on the first side. Everything's exactly the same from side to side as far as the shifters go. We're going to make sure we're in our lowest gear, the least amount of tension on the cable. And then if we take where the cable goes into the shifter, and we go a straight line directly across to the other side of the shifter, you'll see on Shimano anyway, that's where that little screw is. So we're going to remove that. Get in there. There we go. And try not to drop it. It's like a maze with all these shifters. All right, so we got that off there. Put that aside for a second. And now what we can do is we can go ahead and we can do the same thing. We can push our cable through. And it's going to come through the back of the shifter with the little grommet end on there, the nubbin. And we're just going to pull that cable right out. That's our old one. So we can just set that aside. And then we'll go ahead and do the same thing. We'll start cutting our cable housings. So we'll start with the front one. Make sure you pay attention which side of the steering tube it goes on. So this one starts on this side of the shifter, goes around to the opposite side, closest to you. So it comes from this side, comes around the shifter like this, and goes into the house, into the holder. So make sure you watch that, because otherwise it'll be kinked up every time you turn the bike. Although you'll be hurting your cables. So that same piece of cable housing they gave us the first time is going to be big enough to do both front and back. So we're going to remove our plastic end caps. Set those aside for a second. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to take our rolled cable and our new cable. We're going to line up the ends here. And this isn't, we don't have to get down to like the nearest, 100th of a millimeter. You can do it by eye, as long as you're not drastically different. Then we're going to go to the other side of the cable and we'll find where they meet. And we'll go ahead and we'll cut that. Okay, there's our new piece there. So again, same thing as on the other side. We're going to go ahead and we'll make sure our holes are circle and not oval if we use regular cutters. If you use the nice cable cutters, you don't have to worry about it because they're designed to kind of keep everything in line. But I just go ahead and use this nice thing. Now I got my holes nice and round again. Go ahead and put the end caps back on. We'll put this back in place. We'll do the same thing for the back piece. And the other reason I put these in place as I'm working is it helps me to remember what order they came in. So if they're, especially on the front where they kind of weave in and out amongst the cable, the fresher it is in my memory, the better. So I let it sit there. Now I'm going to remove this back little piece of housing. We'll do the same thing. Remove the end caps. Get our new piece of housing. We'll make our little cable here. Okay. All right, there's that. Make our ends the right way. Put our end caps on. Now you'd use the new end caps. I don't have any new end caps because this was a bulk, big, huge piece of cable that I got, so I used them all up already. But you would, the new cable kit is going to come with new ones. By all means, you want to use those because why not? You're building a brand new thing here. All right, so now we take our piece of new cable, unwrap it. Try not to kink the cable. You don't want to make it too tight because what it'll do is it'll bend it, and then you'll get a kink in the cable. It'll shift rough. It's exactly the opposite of what we're looking to do. One end of the cable has the little grommet, the little mushroom there, the piece of braze on. The other end of the cable does not. Okay, so we want to put this end of the cable, the bare end, back through the hole in the shifter. The same hole we removed that screw from. So we're going to go ahead, stick it in. Now listen, if it does not go in, you want to always make sure your shifter is in the lowest gear. So downshift all the way because the hole is only lined up in one direction. So if it's not lined up, then the cable's never going to go through. Now I got lucky. My first cable came right through the plastic piece. So, hooray. So we're going to go ahead and we'll thread this all the way through. And I'm going to do what I did on the front side. Again, I'm just going to take the shifter. I'm going to shift up once. I'm going to shift down once. Shift up once, shift down once. What that's doing is kind of making sure that my cable is all the way into the shifter and then everything functions properly. So I know nothing's messed up over here. I didn't hit the cable in the wrong spot. Everything's working good. So I don't have to find out at the very end when I have everything working together. All right, so now give me 1 second. I'm going to move the camera so we can see the back side of the bike again. Okay, so here is our cable. I'm going to take our end. I'm going to take our piece of cable housing. Now it does make it easier if they're straight, so sometimes I'll take it out of the bike. Go ahead and feed that right through the first side, and let's see. Oh, we got lucky again. It came right through the little hole in the middle. So good. All right, so that's good. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull all the slack to here. Set it inside the frame, right inside the holder. And then we're going to take our cable, we're going to feed it down and put our cable housing back into the frame here on the bottom. Now there's a notch in the holders on the frame, so you'll be able to fit the cable through them even though it's in already. So now we've got our cable. Let me bring the bike up again so you can see the shifter. Okay. Okay, so now we've got our cable back down to our front shifter. The camera right where it's supposed to be. So this shifter has a piece that's like a ramp in the back. The cable goes around and then up to the screw. I take that back, it does not, it goes down. That's where it was routed from the bottom. This one is gonna go right through the screw hole here, because we're pulling from the top. Okay, so we're gonna feed that right through. There's a hole that's in there between the screw and the housing. So once you loosen the screw enough, you'll see the hole. You're gonna slide the cable right through there and get it nice and tight. And then we're going to do the same thing on the front that we did on the other side as far as that little barrel adjuster. We're going to make sure it's about halfway between open and closed. So I'm going to do that right now, make sure we got this thing all set. This way we'll have enough of an adjustment in either direction in case we've either made it too tight or too loose. So that'll give us enough leeway to play with it and make sure that we can get the right adjustment on there. Now, this one's a little tricky because you got to use both hands at the same time. So what we do is we take the cable with one hand. I usually take my thumb and I kind of push it on top between my fingers. Grab the cable in my hand. I grab the cable in my hand and I'll take my thumb and put it on top and I'll pull it against the derailleur. If this hand was the derailleur, I'll pull the cable tight. That gives me a little tension on it, and that's the idea. We want to get that kind of as tight as we can without moving the derailleur. That's the trick. If you get it too tight, the derailleur will start to like move as if it's trying to shift up. That's not what we want. We want the happy medium between that. So now we're going to tighten this front cable nut until it is holding the cable securely. So, hand tight is good. You don't have to be super tight. We may have to adjust this again. Now, we're going to do the same test we did in the back, but for the front. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to shift up. That shifts to our second gear. That shifts to our third gear. Stay all the way. All right, so you can hear it's a little off, but we can make some adjustments in the front with that. As long as it's shifting good to all three. That's all we care about right now. So we're right there. Okay, so we need to adjust a little bit. It is working. Okay, so that's good. So now we'll go back. Now we can cut our front cable here. So now we know we're in a good spot. We can take these two screws and we'll tighten them up. You don't have to be super tight. It's only aluminum. So we can do this and we'll tighten up the back one here. And again, just hand tight is all you need, just enough to you start feeling some good resistance on it, and that's it. If the wrench leaves a mark in your hand, it's too tight. So now with our front cable, what we're gonna do is we're gonna, again, measure 2 fingers from where the screw is. And you can go ahead and cut it there. We don't need a ton of slack up here. There's a lot of moving parts in this part of the bike and we don't wanna get anything caught up. So, now, we're going to put the end caps on the cables before they get frayed or we stab ourselves with them. So these little guys come, you can buy them on Amazon or you can buy them at the bike shop. They're just a little aluminum end caps there. They slide over the cable and you squeeze them tight with a pair of pliers. So, and that just keeps the end of the cable from getting frayed and sharp and poking everybody and just basically damaged. So we go ahead and tighten that on there. You don't have to go super tight, they're just holding the cable. There's no tension on these. And they're just little aluminum pieces. Keep our fingers happy. Okay, so now that we've got everything together, we can go ahead and start adjusting the shifting. I'm gonna start on the front first since that's where the camera's at already. the same rules apply. The tighter the cable goes, the further the shifter is going to be to the outside. So the tighter we make the cable, in other words, the more of this insert, the further out the cable comes, the more tension is on here, then the further out it's going to go. So if we have a problem shifting that way, we're going to tighten front. If we have a problem with it being too hard to shift down, we're going to loosen the cable. So let's see. I think we're rubbing the inside. So put this in. You always want to make sure your rear derailleur is set to the middle gear. That way, you're not rubbing because of that. So there's that. So we need a little help shifting up, it looks like. We have to find the shift down. But shifting up a little slow. So we're going to add some tension to the cable. So we're going to unscrew the front one if we're looking at it counterclockwise. So let's see. Now we're going to try it again. Okay? All right, shifts good now. All right, so now I'm going to go back to the middle ring. If I have a triple, I'm going to put it to the middle ring on the front. If I have a double on the front, I'm going to go to the smallest ring. Now I'm going to adjust the back side. It's the same thing. On some bikes, the adjustment is back here at the derailleur. On this bike, it happens to be up here at the shifter. So the same thing. The tighter I make this cable, the further out my derailleur is going to be. So let's see how we're shifting back here. Down is good. Up is a little slow. All right, let's see. Yeah, all right. So we got to tighten it just a little tiny bit. So we'll do that. All right. Let's see where we're at now. The back is little adjustments. You really don't want to go more than about a half a turn at a time. Because what's going to happen is it makes a big difference. All right, it's good on the back. All right, so that's basically the whole class. I apologize for all the technical delays and interruptions. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I hope everyone got something out of it. And is there any questions before we sign off? Alan, are you still there? I think Alan fell asleep. Alan? Well, thanks a lot for coming, everybody. I'm not sure what happened, but I hope everyone can hear me. And again, I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate everyone coming in. And thanks a lot. I hope everyone learned something. And if you didn't, if you have any further questions, feel free, shoot me. You can't hear? Oh, okay. All right. Well, listen, I'm not running the meeting, so I can't end this. So I will say goodnight, I guess, and I guess that's it. All right. Ken's saying wait. All right, Dan, thanks for sharing. Dan, thank you, Dan. I can see you guys' comments, so that's great. Joe, hey, thanks. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate it. Can't wait to see everyone in person again. It's nice to see